All right, here we are approaching the end of 2022, and all week we've been taking a look back at some of the biggest stories of the year.
And one of the headlines was the return of major events for the first time since the pandemic began. So for a closer look at this, we're joined by Andrew Weir, Executive Vice President of Destination Development at Destination Toronto. Andrew, great to have you in the studio.
Yes, it is nice to be back here.
And, you know, like the stories we're talking about, this is a return to in-person interviews as well. So great of you to finally join us face to face. Andrew, let's talk about, you know, the big return to events post-pandemic. CNE, right?
I think all summer long. Yeah. Well, through the summer and through the fall, you know, but we saw the hunger of people to come back. You know, just like you said, it's good to be back in the studio here. People want to be back enjoying these events. Obviously, it's good for the economy across Toronto. We've seen the power of these kinds of events to drive visitation and resident engagement too. So part of it is people coming into the city, but it's also very much, it's about Torontonians getting out and doing all those things that we couldn't do for almost 2 years, or at least parts of 2 years. And we saw that strong rebound, which is encouraging. There's still some road to travel. You know, we're not all the way back yet in terms of the visitor economy, but you know, those events really helped make a big start this year.
And interestingly enough, this summer too, Andrew, we had the big summer events, you know, Pride, Caribbean, or Carnival, CNE, etc. But then even just recently with the World Cup, you know, we've seen the cafes and the bars and the pubs packed even in the mornings as people have been getting together and cheer on their fans, which I'm sure has been good for the local restaurant and tourism industry, right? Because that's a kind of kick you don't expect this time of year necessarily.
Absolutely. Well, you know, we saw it when the Blue Jays had the run through the playoffs, and you know, well, anything that brings people together, and we've seen again through the pandemic, we were all the things that we really wanted to. We were told we couldn't get together, we couldn't celebrate together, and so now when we're suddenly allowed to do that again, you see that elastic band just kind of, you know, snap, and everyone's coming right back to it, which is encouraging. There was a lot of talk early in the pandemic about what would happen with the future of meetings and events, what would happen with the future of festivals. So I think seeing the response of consumers has been very, very encouraging as we build now and book all those future meetings and events that are going to come back to the city and help spur the economy in the years ahead. It's encouraging to see how keen people have been to get back to these kinds of events.
Absolutely. I mean, the surge has been so big that, you know, lineups for rides at, let's say, Canada's Wonderland was 3 times or 4 times what it would normally be. Andrew, let's talk about other events that might shape or impact Toronto tourism. We know that the Freedom Convoy protest, Chrystia Freeland was very worried that would hurt our economy. The delays at Pearson Airport, what that does to the reputation of Toronto as a main hub to visit. What's your take on that and how you see that improving?
Yeah, I think there's always a concern reputationally about how Canada is seen. And, you know, the reality is in terms of booking future major events and conventions for the city, we took a step back over the last couple of years. You know, there was a period of time when American cities and destinations were booking meetings and were actively selling, and we couldn't yet because when we talked to the clients in the U.S., they said, well, are you open? Are you not? What do I need? And so forget it. We'll just go to Chicago, right? And so there was a period of time when we really had we're fighting with 1 or 2 hands tied behind our back. I think we're past a lot of that now, but the fact that we lost that time is. We're going to see that in the years ahead because we typically book meetings and conventions 3, 4, 5 years in advance. So next year's a strong year. We'll have a lot of meetings because a lot of that is rescheduled meetings from 20 and 21 that were canceled that we've been able to rebook into 23. So it'll be a very good year. But when we look a little further out, 25, 26, that pipeline's not quite as strong because we did have that period of time when all Canadian destinations, Toronto included, really were at a disadvantage, particularly in that important U.S. market. So we're working hard against it right now, but I think it's important to keep that in mind that when we see how busy next year is, when you look further out, there's still a little bit of legacy from the pandemic that we've got to get past.
Well, and the other legacy of the pandemic, and I'm sure as you ramp up to next year in particular, Andrew, is what we understand from hotels and restaurants, et cetera, is they can't find the labor right now. That seems to be the big drag here, is that as much as you're excited to bring people back, they've got to have the people to be able to sort of help, you know, clean the rooms, make the beds, serve the food, cook the food, all these kind of industries.
It's a huge reality. It's a huge issue. You know, the Tourism Industry Association of Ontario just published, alongside the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, a new kind of roadmap and assessment of the tourism industry, and labor's at the top of the list. It's one of the biggest issues. It was an issue before the pandemic, and then, of course, during the pandemic, for a whole variety of very legitimate and valid and important reasons, we saw a lot of flight from the industry to other sectors, people that have affordability issues in the city, and so there's work to do, absolutely, and it's going to take the private sector and government and a lot of partners to come together to really address this for the long term, not just a short-term fix, but the labor issue is going to be an issue going forward.
And lastly, before we let you go, Andrew, what are you predicting for 2026? It is the year that we are co-hosting the World Cup, so do you see anything?
This is always a great place like you said it earlier, this is a great place to be during the World Cup because we've got, it's a home game for everyone here. So I think Toronto has a very special place in the World Cup. But we've got our own team now to cheer about. And the women's team has really led the way, and they've showed the way to at that championship level. So let's see what the men can do. But I think we're all pretty optimistic from what we saw this year.
All right, great to look back and always exciting to look ahead too. Andrew Weir is the Executive Vice President of Destination Development, Destination Toronto. Pardon me, bit of a mouthful, but listen. Have a great Christmas. Thanks for being in here to look back at 2022.
Thank you. Okay, we'll see you again.
Thank you. Happy holidays.